Welcome, everyone. Hello. Good evening. My name is Kelly Lee, and I am honored to be able to say that I am on the boards of both BalletX and the Athenaeum of Philadelphia. Both amazing institutions, and Philadelphia is so lucky that we have them here in our city. But by show of hands, how many of you are visiting the Athenaeum for the first time? Great. Well, I hope that after this experience and this evening's conversation in this historic building, the coolest library and working space in Philadelphia, and a vibrant cultural forum, that you will be inspired to become members and to come back often and enjoy all of the cultural programming that the Athenaeum offers. And by show of hands, how many of you have never seen a BalletX performance? Oh, not bad. Well, for you, I hope that after participating in what will be an engaging conversation about BalletX's world premiere, Maslow's Peak, that you will not only be excited to see Maslow's Peak, but you will be inspired to subscribe and support all future BalletX performances. So BalletX is amazing for many reasons, but what they do best, hands down, is excellent storytelling through movement. Knowing the hard work, planning, and resources that have gone into the production of Maslow's Peak, I am so excited that soon we will all be able to see it. And with that, I want to turn the program over to BalletX's fabulous rehearsal director and community liaison, Keelan Whitmore, to give us a little bit more information about BalletX, his role, and to lead us in a conversation with Jennifer Archibald, the extremely innovative and creator and choreographer of Maslow's Peak.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keelan Whitmore, and I am the rehearsal director and community liaison for BalletX. This is my second season with the company now, and I'm really, really excited to be here. Thank you very much to the Athenaeum for having us here to have a deep discussion about Maslow's Peak and the creative process. As Kelly said, BalletX is Philadelphia's premier ballet. We commission over 140 works by more than 80 choreographers. Everyone knows the spiel because we have so many familiar faces in the room, so this is really, really wonderful. My role is to assist the choreographers in the creative process, and this is a really, really intimate relationship, actually, that we build over time, and luckily I've been able to work on now. This is my third work with Jennifer, and we will get into our relationship and the relationship that she has with the dancers and with Christine and with the entire production company. We're really, really excited to talk about how a ballet comes together, so we give you a little bit behind the scenes on what it means and what it takes to create a work. So here's a little presentation about Maslow's Peak from last season.
And stop. Okay. Okay. So we're back again. Round two. Let's start this again. I'm here working on a preview section for a full length that I will be creating for BalletX in the next season. The elbows are going to go here to behind you. Really movement research to figure out how I'm going to develop character work and different themes and concepts. She's getting pulled in from that corner. Can we make sure that we have a clear focus when we walk on and also when you're in the wings to that corner? The story is Lord of the Flies. It's definitely a book that challenges humanity. And you try to pull off the floor, but you continue, yeah. So there's that happening, that's right. And then at some point, you're exhausted from the fight. I'm trying to do the best that I can to find these connections with the book and with the dancers in front of me. And 1, 2, stop. You know what? There was a conversation about shedding skin with the dancers. And I was asking the dancers to draw on experiences, what type of masks they have on when they walk into a room. What is it to be fully transparent? What is it to be completely 100% vulnerable? And that's where the improvisational work began to stem from. I'm just curious, Lenny, are you able to improv? Goom, goom, boom, ga, 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 ga. So it has to be hit, hit, ga, da, 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 hit, hit, yeah? And cut. Do it one more time. If there was a hummingbird that was playing with you and you had to follow it, what would happen? There's a rigor to dance training that creates technicians. Dancers are trained to be as perfect as possible. That's it. And then now make it look like there's really something substantial on the floor that you're trying to get rid of. Finding the humanity within that technique is not always easy to do. Just fall out of it, now recover out of it, and then go in, and then jump back. Yes, you can't control it. Especially when you're in a room with mirrors, and you have people in the front of the room that are taking notes and looking at whether the plie was perfect, or whether your leg was high enough. Did we hit the pirouette? Whether you hit your fifth. That's the problem. Because we as humans aren't perfect. And finding that imperfection within the perfection is a constant battle throughout a 4-hour rehearsal. Okay, I think that's enough.
Me too.
You think that's enough? Okay, so then that's the master plan. We'll just make sure that we're not panicking. As soon as we're not panicking, we'll be on a roll. Walking into a rehearsal process, you got to be extremely open and raw in order to dive deep into character work. Is there something hesitant, or I'll be the brave one out of all of you to see the space in front of us? Okay. And I think that's exciting for a dance company to tap into. It doesn't look like you're acting it from a level of frustration. Does that make sense? There's a lot of discovery that's happened in the past 2 weeks. Dancers are coming up to me on the side and having these conversations about their habits and how we're going to break through in order to get down to who they really are. Push through the whole back. The whole core has to speak, yes. A challenge for the dancers is to find these different textures and dynamics that could speak into different parts of their personality. And I think that's what's really interesting and beautiful about the process, because you really get a piece of that human on stage in front of you.
Testing, testing. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Wonderful. Let's welcome Jennifer Archibald.
Hi.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. I've just seen you in rehearsal out at Proof. We are working off-site today. We're not in our studios. We're in New Jersey working with Proof Productions, where the set is, where we're interacting with the set all of the different elements, a little bit with the lighting and the projection, and it's quite, actually we're really fortunate to have a few extra days because it takes a little bit of time to get all of the elements together, so we're really, really happy to iron out some of the logistics. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit, let's start from the beginning. What made you choose this path of dance and choreography? How has this affected your life?
Well, I've wanted to choreograph since I was a little girl. So I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and it's just, I think my parents knew right from the beginning that I was going to dance, but I think my teachers and the choreographers that I came across when I was in high school knew that I wanted to choreograph. So I would do the exercises, but I'd always add a little bit of something else to it. So I just think choreography has been in my blood for a long time, and making dances in high school and continuing to do that in university. And I had, after I went to college in Toronto for a couple of years, then I went to the Alvin Ailey School in New York City, and it's just where I wanted to be from when I was a little girl. And just working with a stronger rigor was what set the tone for my choreographic career.
It's wonderful. And your choreographic career, you use a lot of different styles, particularly hip hop and ballet and contemporary dance. Tell us where that really came from.
I mean, I think there's a lot of music that was playing in my home all the time. So if it was classical or calypso or house music, hip hop music, everything, I just was introduced to a wide range of music. And as a result of that, that is definitely the impetus for me to make movement. And you could see that as a child, and it's continued when I wanted to make dances. So I just, I just was always creating and always taking things in. And after I went to the Ailey School, I went to acting school. And I think that acting program made a huge difference in the way I directed in the room and the way I saw movement and what I was asking dancers to do. And I think marrying the two is what made a clearer voice for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Dancers and actors are two worlds apart. They're really apples and oranges, and I've worked with actors as well, and they have a lot more say in the creative process. Dancers, we are much more disciplined, and it's a little bit Simon Says. And Jennifer, I always appreciate watching how you really collaborate with the dancers. Tell us how important that is for you. I mean, you got that from acting school, or just also how that informs your choreographic voice.
I mean, I think it's really important for a dancer to walk into a dancing space and own their movement and understand why they're doing what they're doing. To simply repeat is not interesting, and it doesn't allow them to take ownership of why they're on stage. So the conversation in the room is just as important as their facility and their execution. What do you think about this? How does this feel? Would you prefer to turn this way or that way? What are you seeing? There is a emotional response to all movement, I believe, and I think tapping into those connections makes the dancer more truthful on stage. And I think it's just when you look at conservatory training, it's always very separate. So you've got your technique classes from 9 to 5, and then you might have, we had an acting class at Ailey, but it wasn't as expansive as probably it should be, and just taking acting for one semester isn't going to change how you're going to really execute. So it's interesting for me to walk into a conservatory school and teach a dancer and give them acting prompts. And then when I teach at Yale, I'm dealing with actors and their ability to act. They're so clear about what images can prompt movement. So it's just, it's something that I think is a tool that more dancers need to be connected with.
Yeah. And it's really interesting when you walk into a room, Jennifer is on the cover of Dance Magazine, last month's cover of Dance Magazine, which is really, really wonderful, being even more celebrated in our community. So you've worked with a lot of different companies and you've seen a lot of dancers, you've seen a lot of dance. What do you look for in dancers, and when do you know to push and when to pull back with the dancer?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. Ideally, in terms of execution, I just want the dancer to have as much versatility as possible. I work with a lot of ballet companies, but I used to teach hip hop in New York City for several years. So the idea of a dancer being able to create a classical line and be able to find different textures and break it and find punctuation in the movement is equally important. And your ability to project, your ability to act. I don't want to control every single moment, which is definitely unorthodox in the ballet realm. I want to be able to create a phrase and for you to be able to find the connections, for you to figure out how to come in and out of it. And those are important moments for ownership. So when you're watching a dancer, you're seeing stylistically who that person is within the movement. And it creates a much more trusting relationship with me and the dancer. You know, being in a creative space where you enjoy working with the choreographer and not feel like you're just being told to do this and that is a different experience than other experiences. So I try to manage that well. In terms of looking at, I'm very clear about seeing all dancers in the room, whether you're the principal or whether you're a corps de ballet. I think that just comes from me teaching. While I've been choreographing for so many years, I just think it's a hard industry to show up in and to be appreciated in. So when you have a choreographer that's like, let's workshop, let's look at the process, let's see what you can bring to the table, it creates a sense of calmness where it's not always about the product, it's about the process.
Yeah. This is really wonderful, especially because I see the BalletX dancers through many processes, and to see Jennifer really reach deeply and to really challenge and demand from the dancers, it's really wonderful because it is part of the work that we do, that I do, especially getting them to grow as artists. We have such short careers, even if you have a 25-year career, your next career might be longer. So to see them grow and for them to have a process where they are able to flourish and to have a breakthrough. Breakthrough is such a huge word that we use in our creative process. Is really, really wonderful. So having Jennifer a part of the BalletX family for this new creation is really, really fantastic. So let's go back to young Jennifer, younger Jennifer, starting out as a choreographer. She's still young. And so when things started to roll a little bit more, tell us a little bit about some pivotal moments in your career where you're like, it was like the next step for you.
Oh, well, I got commissioned for the second company of the second company of Alvin Ailey. That piece stayed in the repertory for a while and it began to tour. For me, when pieces begin to tour, it just gives you a little bit more exposure. Your name starts hitting the newspapers more consistently. I was always teaching and always picking up a lot of academic residencies. So that's if I go to different universities and work with the dance program and set work. So Fordham commissioned me. I did a piece for the sophomores, and the artistic director of Atlanta Ballet named John McFall had seen a tech, and he called me on the way back to Atlanta at 8 o'clock in the morning and said, I think you should come to Atlanta and set work. And I just remember I didn't believe he actually had my phone. It was just it was a teacher at the Ailey School that had given him my contact information, so it threw me off guard. After that, he ended up calling Victoria Morgan, who was a famous ballerina from San Francisco, and she was the artistic director of Cincinnati Ballet for several years. I did a 10-minute work there, and it was well received. And after a 24-minute work, she invited me for coffee and asked me if I would be the resident. So I was the resident choreographer there for a couple of years, setting work, and I find that the ballet industry particularly is sort of a, it's a small community, and all the artistic directors are watching who is being commissioned. And if you put a strong 10-minute work, then they'll ask you to do a 15, and they'll ask you to do a 24, so you're just riding that wave of trying to produce at an elite level, and building a reputation that you are good to work with, and that you'll get reliable and get called back again, and that's sort of what has happened consistently.
And you've worked with BalletX before. What first drew you to the company?
BalletX was on my radar even when I was at school, just because I realized that they were doing things on a point shoe that was just pushing the boundaries of classical technique.
Yeah.
And that is where I wanted to be in terms of my movement research. And it was just, like, sometimes you can just see afar what dancers will probably execute your work well and will understand your vision of movement. And that is, I just had my eyes on that company for a long time. I had emailed Christine 5 years prior, before she actually responded. So it's been a road, it's been a long road. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so from your first work and then going more out into the world, how has your creative process evolved over time?
I think opportunities of giving you space to do 10 minutes versus 24 minutes allows you to expand your palette. There's a lot of factors that affect how you create and what you create. But I do think working at Yale definitely made a huge shift in my storytelling, because my colleagues are so clear about intention and character analysis, and it just really forced me to look at the why behind every movement gesture.
Yeah, this helps us, it helps the story transcend and go beyond the proscenium. That's always the case, and that's something that, I find it very interesting and also an honor to have Jennifer's trust. I sit next to her and I whisper a little bit in her ear, and she's like, oh, I see that, no, that. So this sort of back and forth that we have is really, really, really great. Not a lot of choreographers are comfortable with that, which is totally understandable. They want to have their voice be very singular, but collaboration is something that is really at the heart of BalletX, what you say, and I mean, very much so. Christine is very hands-on as well, and I am too, and to have someone who is so distinct, I think, and so strong in her character and can sit well, but also take feedback is really, really, it's inspiring for all of us, because the dancers also see how we interact. So tell us a little bit about the pièce de résistance, I think that's how you say it, Maslow's Peak. Tell us a little, why Maslow's Peak?
Why Maslow's
Why
Peak?
Maslow's Peak?
Probably in the last 5 years, I was getting asked about pitching different story ballets. And, I have a couple in my back pocket, and some of them will be more fitting for one company versus the other. And I just thought that Lord of the Flies was something that I was interested in thematically and did not lie in fantasy, because a lot of these ballet stories that you usually see lie in this fantasy love story world. And it's not really my personality to do that. So I usually look at, if I am going to pick a story, how it can sit in social justice art making, and I try to find an angle to figure out how to get there.
And so we are very interested, so tell us a little bit about the themes that you're working with within Maslow's Peak. So are you following the story exactly? Are you abstracting the story? What will, I mean, because we did see a preview last season in the spring, which was really exceptional and really well received. So how are you expanding those themes? What was that process like to take that information that you had on the dancers? You were out in the world as well, trying other things, and now you are here in January, and now you're here for a month.
Yeah, it was a lot of, it was a struggle in the sense of every time people in the industry spoke to me, they asked, well, are you going to do a literal, is it going to be a literal narrative? And when you get asked that constantly, you begin to think that that's what you're supposed to do. And they'll ask me, well, what about the characters? And it's just, the bottom line for me is, why am I picking Lord of the Flies, and what is so interesting about the themes, and how does it affect the world today? And let me take that angle instead of the character names of every single buddy in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think even if I did that, you'd be sitting there for 2.5 hours and probably want to go home. So the themes of authority and interdependence and moral responsibility and survival, those were themes that land on me, and I think that I can speak through movement honestly and reflect on it and have the dancers reflect on it. And I think an audience can see movement like that on stage and understand it and feel it. And though that's why I chose that's why I chose that. Yeah. And as the more you dissect this book, that was those elements of survival and really understanding the needs to full fulfillment was where I began to investigate Maslow's theory.
Yeah, and it's always interesting working with some sort of material, with an idea, and having something that's already so well established, such as the novel. Did you find comfort in having something there, or were there surprises, or did you feel a little bit more constricted because you had something to work with where there maybe are expectations that you have to
I think it's the expectations. It's finding that fine line between abstract and realism, and trying to figure out how are you going to keep the audience really connected with what you're doing, and do they understand it?
Yeah. Can
you walk into the theater and may not have read Lord of the Flies for several years and still get it? And those are the challenges. That's when things start to become really complex in terms of the sequence, order of events in the work, and then also developing who the central characters are. And for me, when you see the work, you'll see Jack and Ralph, and then you'll see others.
So tell us a little bit about your collaborators, because you can also lean on not just me, but you have Kate Mattingly, and you have Guy, and then you have a lighting designer. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, Guy Delancey is the scenic designer, and he worked with me on a project that I did in Tulsa about Black Wall Street, and then he also worked with me on a piece that I did about the Holocaust, about a South African dancer named Florence Warren, who worked for the resistance. So he works at Columbia and directs the media lab there. And I work at Columbia as well, and we've just spent a lot of time in that media lab trying to figure out how to present dance in sort of a new age way, using projection. And he is also an actor, so I think understanding character and script is extremely helpful when you are building a team, or if you're going to be developing the stories that I want to focus on. Yeah. I have Kate Mattingly. She is a dance critic, and she also is my dramaturg, and she just keeps me in line in terms of making sure that what I'm doing is readable, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like basically anything, any decisions that I'm making movement-wise. I've been working with her this week, and she's like, well, why is that character standing on top of that part of the set? And as they walk through space, what are the dancers feeling as the division is happening? So there's a lot of questions, just constantly questioning while I'm creating, and that's what you need. You need to be constantly challenged when you're creating work.
Yeah. During my career in Germany, we also worked with a dramaturg, and it was very interesting. She would leave the room and then come back, and it was always sort of like, is Esther going to like it? Is she going to get it? And so we all were almost sort of working for the dramaturg, because they are the ones who really do a lot of the research. I mean, the choreographer also, but the choreographer is trying to interpret, and that interpretation has to have some sort of connection to what the context of what the material is. So it's really, really interesting. And I find that it would be really interesting if more companies worked with this system of dramaturg, so that there's even more of a connection to a material, to something that really grounds the work and that can translate and transcend the proscenium, as I said before. It's something that's really, really interesting. So tell us, were there any surprises along the way or discoveries from when you started conceptualizing, this Maslow's peak to right now? We're not done, we still have another month, but any surprises or discoveries?
Surprises? I mean, the collaborators of trying to get a fabricator, it's sort of the nuts and bolts of the work. It's not necessarily conceptually, but trying to get a fabricator to create a whole set is a whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not all, and just engineering things and getting it licensed to make sure that these dancers don't get hurt. That's a whole other conversation and a learning curve. So you go from like doing a dance with a bench, and then all of a sudden you're doing a bench with all this other stuff that's happening. You're like, oh, we really have to be like tapped in to every single thing. We're talking about measurements on Zoom meetings, like it pulls me out conceptually. I'm not really a fan of it, but it's a skill set that I need to learn, and if I continue to do full lengths across the US, I'm gonna have to get these skills under my belt. So there's been some surprising things that
Yeah, but I think it's really wonderful, because we're all here to support this process, and so it being your first full length, how does that feel beyond the challenges? But how does it feel to I'm creating my first full length? How does that settle in your body?
I mean, it's been a long road.
Yeah.
So it's a process where you've developed a reputation where people will trust you and invest in you, and you need to make sure that you produce.
Yeah.
It's really that's what it is.
What have been some of the most rewarding moments then?
The most rewarding moments?
Yeah.
I probably will get there when I see it on stage. Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful. When I walked into productions, the set is larger than this room, So for me to see something like that is really, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then you go into, let's get it done.
Yeah. I enjoy watching you and Steve, who's the head of Proof Productions, and watching Jennifer and Steve communicate and to get these things done. Like, Steve is a very energetic and very funny person, and
Yes.
I find that that's really sort of rewarding, and also seeing how the dancers are trying things out. This is really, really something very, very interesting. So, what do you want the audience to take away from this piece? I know this is sort of like a trendy question, but you were speaking a little bit with Daniel Madoff a little bit, and this was a really beautiful moment. And just what do you want the audience to take away?
I think we're pushing ballet into another chapter, into a new chapter, where we can start looking at how classical technique can expand in more contemporary ways and more emotional ways, and we don't always have to lean on tradition for perfection.
Yeah. That's huge. That's really, really huge. I think there's also something very interesting you mentioned a little bit earlier, the social justice impact that your work can have and has had, and the opportunity that presents itself in this story as well. You know, and the idea of what Maslow's theory sort of meant, and or what it means, and how I remember Janet was just saying, you know, this is one of the larger, you know, concepts of self-actualization. Like, talk to us about Jack and it's not Pete, Jack and
Ralph.
And Ralph, yeah, and who they are for you as a lens to reflect society.
You know, it's interesting because sometimes you don't want to typecast, but I think when you walk into a space and you are looking at these dancers' personality, we landed in a very clear, it was like, I'm gonna make this person that Ralph, and I'm gonna make this person, and he can exude that power. So it's been interesting. And then we need covers. And I said, well, why don't we make Ralph a woman? And starting to play with gender. So there's different things that I have tried to look at beyond what the story is given to you on paper. And I think that's what makes this story exciting. Over the course of the choreography, over the course of the residency, you could see the dancers on the outside begin to take sides. And you were also seeing the dancers make decisions about how they felt about you could see that moral compass shift within them. And that, to me, I thought, okay, we're getting somewhere. I think they're not just receiving material anymore. Now they're trying to digest it and act it out. And when you are dealing with dancing artists who may have never taken an acting class, or a dancing artist who is just coming out of Kaufman School of the Arts, or who's 22 or 23, they may not know how to connect with characters or have enough life experience to even bring to that work.
Yeah.
So it's constant peeling and figuring out how to zone in and get them to really look at what they're doing beyond the movement, so that an audience can really feel something.
Yeah, I think there's something very interesting because, yeah, you see the qualities that you identify with those characters, but those dancers might not know how to really get to the essence of who those characters are. And so that although there's a bit of typecasting that happens, the process to get to the bone marrow of it is really, really interesting. And it is, as I always say, there's a lot of unlearning that dancers have to do. You know, we need this technique, we need this sort of, you need the box, but it's like once you've graduated and once you have the job, how do you start to interpret or reimagine the box, or origami the box, I tell the dancers, you know, or change the material of the box. Maybe it's metal, maybe it's, you know, clay. So this is always something that's very, very interesting to see how that process, how we can, and how you can see beyond, and you can see where they need to be, even though you know where they are, and they can be exactly that. That's always a really fun process. So I think there's some discoveries that, you know, the dancers have also that they are observing and they're witnessing in themselves and in their colleagues as well. So it's not just putting on a good show, you know, we're all sort of growing, which is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, when you see a dancer go on their 5-minute break and they pick up the book instead of picking up their phone,
Yeah.
we have done something. We're like, yes.
And I'm like,
They're
"We're
invested.
back."
They're invested
But wait, one
for
more.
5 hours in rehearsal, and they're about the book and trying to figure out. They come up to me and they're like, "Why don't we try this?" Or "I'm seeing this vision," and that's exciting and surprising about the process. Because sometimes they go on their break and they don't even look at you. You know, they're like at the side and they're like sewing their pointe shoes. It's like they can turn it off and then come back on. So this is incredibly different.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, if you'd like, what's your next project? What can the dance community look forward to next coming from Jennifer Archibald?
I've done a lot of commissions in the United States, and I'm going to be getting commissioned for the National Ballet of Canada. So I'm going back home to set work for National Ballet of Canada, which is nice for my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
I've been in New York City for 25 years, and I've worked extremely hard. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations. This is really, really fantastic. And we're going to be seeing so much more of Jennifer Archibald. Yeah, let's just. Beautiful. Yeah, maybe.
So we have some time for questions, if, right here?
Okay. Okay. We brought books in immediately.
Yes.
I'm not convinced that all of them read them by the time I had the first week of school. So I definitely made an announcement. I said, you need to read this book. And I said, if you don't read this book, I'm going to know. And then,
We also provided the YouTube,
Yes.
The YouTube link to the
yeah.
movie.
Because some of them were like, can we just watch the movie? I was like, can you please read the book? Read the book. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Lord of the Flies.
Well, Maslow's, so the hierarchy of needs, I looked at it as what are the lessons we're learning over the class? And it's really that. I try to hold a mirror to the audience when I create work, and I think we will see ourselves within it. I'll say that. In terms of policy, I am not shocked, but I am, I think creating work that reflects what happens in the world makes art more interesting. And it's definitely been consistent in my art making. When I did Tulsa, when I did the Black Wall Street, I went into the town and started, it was I call it a documentary ballet, and we went into the town and we were interviewing people from both sides of the train tracks. And when we had the performance, there was an evening where only the Black community, well, not only, but most of the Black community were invited. And it was very interesting that after that Thursday evening, on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, it went directly back to white patrons. And when I did the Florence Warren work, that happened 4 days. We went on stage 4 days after the war started. Wow. And we had to have security in the theater. And then here we are now. So the pressure of creating social justice work under the circumstances of what's happening in the world and seeing different communities coming in and out of the theater is challenging and it is stressful. And you just have to be really mindful with how you present work and also be really mindful with the different dancers that are in the room. Really honoring everyone in the space. Yeah. Welcome. So I am engineering the score myself. I have I've been working on it for 8 months, and the music is anywhere from classical to shamanic drumming to percussion from the Congo to percussion from Turkey to almost, it's like scenic music from Sweden. So there's a lot of different sounds that you'll hear birds, you'll hear sounds of the jungle, and then you'll hear a landscape of different sounds that complement the storytelling. It just takes time. I mean, up until Monday, I was still shifting. You have to shift these different sounds to complement the emotional arcs that are happening in the work. And I am creating the music and adjusting the music as I choreograph simultaneously. And I think that's what keeps it alive and fresh, and also interesting for the dancers. The dancers heard for the first time today the last track. So I also try to just not lay everything out. And when I do choreograph, to make sure that not all of my choreography is constantly looking the same in terms of punctuation and flow, I also use other music in the studio while I'm choreographing that could potentially have nothing to do with the score. It also keeps the dancers alive mentally, where it's just sort of an exploration tool, but it also helps me manage my movement impulses. Okay. It's not the only way to think about music, but it's a possible way. And that's the way I think about it. My question is, aren't there dance performers who think about dance the way I think about music, and are they any good?
Yes. But also no, because we're human, and I think part of the training, part of the process is to put the dancers through, I'm going to be very candid, a bit of a boot camp, so that they are prepared for anything that happens, so that a bad performance isn't a bad performance, it's just the performance of that evening. So that dance is living and breathing and going beyond any sort of mental construct of perfection. Like there is, like most masterpieces, there's some imperfection in a masterpiece, you know. So your best performance, and as a performer, I remember like having some great performances, and then my director was like, I don't know about this, or having really horrible performances, and them saying that was it. So you just never know. I think it's more than anything of it being a perfect performance is being generous and giving yourself no matter what's happening, because we do have outside lives also. So you could be going through something, but the show must go on and you want to be a part of it. So putting yourself through that, you know, sort of boot camp really prepares you for whatever might happen. Maybe the heating goes out that day, or the floor is really slippery. You know, just like instruments expand and contract, our instrument also changes, you know. So, or you might have a partner who's not feeling well, or who you might be mad at, or, you know, something might happen. But one thing, I wanted to ask a question, because as I move away from dance, and I'm choreographing as well, and I just had a premiere, and a little bit of anxiety that happens as a choreographer, because you don't have any control over the work that's happening on stage. How do you sort of deal with that? Do you have sort of, how is it to let go of the dance and let it just happen and worry about if it's all gonna work? Do you understand the question?
You mean that's after it's finished?
Yeah, after
and you
it's
just put it
finished.
on stage?
Yeah. Like that opening night, the premiere.
I mean, I make sure I give a lot of tools before it goes on stage.
Yeah.
And you hopefully, I don't control that. Yeah.
You let it
I
live.
let it ride.
Yeah.
I find that sometimes I've been in companies where they have to perform at 8 p.m. and they want to rehearse between 1 and 4 before the show. And I've always been like, this is not necessary. Mm-hmm. And nothing between 1 and 4 is going to change what's happening at 8, so stop it. Mm-hmm. 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 There's no. And some of them are like, oh, like they're clenching pearls. They don't even understand why that's like, this is absurd. We need perfection on stage. And I'm like, at some point, they need to own it. And I also talk about preparing truthfully in the wings before they walk on stage. And if you can attach yourself emotionally to a life experience that perpetuates the next prompt, you will own it and it will be alive in your body. And if you understand how to tap into that every time, you can go and see live theater and it will move you. And I hope that my dancers are able to acquire that skill when they work with me and when I create.
Yeah.
So that if it goes on tour, I can come in and say, okay, this is still resonating. It's still living in their bodies. I think the only thing that can sometimes be continuously coached is the aesthetic of street dance. There's nuances. There's nuances that are happening in hip hop or in house or in other genres that they may not have been brought up in their training. And you can slowly see the dial go back to their default in training. And those are the, I'll call them habits, that I try to make sure stay alive. But that's why, you have someone like Keelan on the work and keeping their eyes on the work to maintain the integrity of the aesthetic and the storytelling. And that's important. That's why you'll see a piece like Ailey, Revelations, and you see it, and no matter where it is in the city, it lands the way it's supposed to land. Because we understand it from a cultural perspective, but we also understand the movement. There's many layers to that. It's not just the steps. So that's important in my process, to make sure that the dancers understand that on an academic level. Like they have to understand that, so that it's really just not another piece that they whip out of their back pocket.
Right.
Yeah, first, this has been incredibly interesting discussion, so I tremendously appreciate it. You've talked, of course, about yourself, your own choreography, and the dancers. I'd like to change the focus a little to the future audience of this. And the question I have is, you've talked also about a dramaturge as helping you with the dancers. So the question is, what are you doing to prepare the audience for book? Many of them may have read 20 years ago, more years How are you going to prepare them for this, or should you just let it stand on its own? I just don't know.
I mean, I do think you should let it stand on its own. You'll see, when the stage opens, like when the curtain opens, you will find yourself you'll land on the first page of the book, and you'll see where we are. And as the dancers begin to move, you will begin to see the central characters. And then I think the themes will overtake it. And that's ideally how I wanted to ride a 60-minute work, because you're being asked to do 60 minutes. How do you fit a huge novel in 60 minutes? You've got to pinpoint, you've got to figure out, it's like writing a thesis. You've got to figure out what you're going to put, what are the important parts of this, and how are we going to put these pieces together? What's going to stand out? What do we need to eliminate? It's a lot of brainstorming and dissecting and keeping your eye on the prize, keeping your eye on the whole picture, and that's why I say that you really have to pin down this lesson that we're learning from the book, and then it should arrive at the end of that 5 minutes, which is described well. We're working on it. We're trying to figure out if that's gonna happen. But that's what's interesting. It's just trying to get all of these pieces to effectively fall into place.
7?
It's 6:57, so we have time for maybe one more question, and then we have our reception where you can continue the conversation.
Go ahead.
You've lived this process now
Yes.
for many, many months.
Mm-hmm.
Invested yourself at every level,
Mm-hmm.
which we're discussing, not just the choreography, but the music and the set, all of the engineering,
Mm-hmm.
there's pieces that go into making a performance. Does it take you time after the performances have run to let go of it, or you invest in the next project? Or are you like,
I don't have a choice to have downtime based on the momentum that I've been receiving, which is a blessing. I'm not complaining about that, but I think in this industry, I think for a lot of artists, when you get the call, you say yes, and then you wonder if you don't say yes, you're never going to get a call again, right? So habitually, I have had to maintain and struggle and figure out what are the more important jobs and what I'm going to leave behind and who I want to work for and who I don't, what stories I want to tell. Yeah. I probably, in the past 4 months, know that I need to say no more than I have ever used to, because I am tired. Yeah. But I mean, I'm going to National Ballet of Canada, which is one of the biggest commissions, like next week. Right? So it's like I'm compartmentalizing concepts right next to each other, and I've been doing that for a while. But you also can get good at it as well, because you're always on. But I wouldn't say it's, if I was talking to a community of students, I would definitely say to manage your creative health.
Please join me in thanking Jennifer and Keelan for an amazing conversation. And I would just add, buy your tickets to see the performance. Go see it 3 times. Take your friends, and then go on the Athenaeum's website, find their upcoming programs, pick 3, bring your friends, and I can't wait to see you at the next performance here and at BalletX. Thank you for coming.